Hello, I'm Martha Merritt, Dean of International Education at the University of Richmond, and it's my pleasure to announce the launch of the 16th annual ChinaFest. ChinaFest is possible because of the Rose Group, which generously sponsors this partnership to celebrate engagement with China from the University of Richmond and the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Tonight's lecture will bring all these parts together, but first, I want to say a few words about Rose Chen, whose partnership has made all of this possible. Rose was fast friends with Irby Brown, one of my colleagues at the University of Richmond. And the partnership between Rose and Irby led to a film series, a lecture, and other activities that composed ChinaFest at its founding. Now, with the partnership of the VMFA, this has become the largest event that they sponsor every year. And for the University of Richmond, it's a fantastic time for us to reflect on our own engagement with China. So Rose, thank you for being an inspiring founder, for being a strong partner for international education, and for being a friend.
Martha, thank you for the very kind introduction. It has been our very big honor to have Irby B. Brown opening lecture held at University of Richmond. For our 16th annual, I want to express our sincere gratitude to our donors. Some of you have been with us since the very beginning. Your support has enabled us to offer our events free to the general public and to do quality programs. Our committee members, our program partners like VMFA, and best of all, our devoted audience. You have all made it worthwhile and kept us going for 16 years. Thank you. This year, we have a wide array of exciting programs for your enjoyment. Please check the websites at the VMFA for ChinaFest Family Day, Student Panel Hometown Project, and 3 Chinese films at U of R, as well as scrolling down the creative paths at the Rose Group website. The past year has been very challenging for all of us. Out of the gloominess, I had the good fortune to get Ms. Yue-Sai Kan to say yes to be our keynote speaker. Ms. Kan is currently the co-chair of the renowned China Institute, the first bicultural entity of its kind, established in 1926 in Manhattan. Ms. Kan is an Emmy Award-winning TV producer, host, best-selling author of 9 books, entrepreneur, fashion icon, and humanitarian. She was a pioneer in so many fields and continues to inspire young generation and leads in many international projects. I know you all can't wait to hear her talk about her amazing adventures in the journey through a changing China, the China I know. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Ms. Yue-Sai Kan.
Thank you, Rose Chen, for your invitation today. I am very happy to be here. In the last 36 years that I have been involved with China as a media person, businesswoman, author, and philanthropist, I witnessed a country with millions of impoverished people who did not have enough food to eat, clothes to wear, or decent housing. Today, China has eradicated poverty and is now firmly established as the second largest economy in the world. In many ways, hundreds of years didn't accomplish what has taken place in China over the past 4 decades. This is truly an extraordinary period in history, with things moving so fast that we hardly have time to be astonished. There has been a fundamental transformation of 1.4 billion people, their lifestyle, and their future. Speaking as one of a few Chinese Americans who have had this opportunity to be deeply involved in this period starting 1984, I must say it has been a rare privilege that I have not only been a witness, but a participant and beneficiary of this transformation. It has been my honor to be a bridge between the two most powerful countries in the world. They have been the two constants throughout my life, China, where I was born, and the United States, where I am a citizen and have lived most of my life. Fate would have it that I have been given the opportunity to do so many things that had never been done before, and probably no one ever will due to historical reasons. Today, I'm happy to share with you a little bit of my amazing journey and share with you of what I did, how I did it, and in the process, also my observations, critiques, and responses to a radically new China. There is so much to talk about, but I only have 30 minutes. So let's quickly try to cover TV, beauty, women in business, education, and philanthropy. Now, let me give you a little background. After 1949, China completely shut its doors to the outside world. Chairman Mao may have been a brilliant military strategist, but the China under his leadership almost collapsed. Natural disasters, famine, the Great Leap Forward, and the Cultural Revolution, one chaos after another. By the time of his death in 1976, the country's GDP was in the minus. The memories of the last 150 years of foreign humiliation and abuse were still fresh in the Chinese minds when Deng Xiaoping came to power and proclaimed the open door policy in 1978. He initiated a series of reforms, including private ownership, market economy, and opening China to the outside world, especially using TV. This jump-started the extraordinary transformation of modern-day China. Coinciding with this historic moment is a shift in the U.S. policy towards China. By aligning with China, Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger hoped to up its game against the Soviet Union, but there was also a genuine desire to bring China into the world family by introducing universal values to its people, such as democracy, human rights, and prosperity. It was against this backdrop that my first collaboration with China began in 1984. But first, a little about me. I was born in Guilin in Guangxi province in China's southwest. My family moved to Hong Kong when I was 2. Then at the age of 16, I went to Brigham Young University in Hawaii to attend college. Because Hong Kong was British and China was totally closed, I knew almost nothing about China until I moved to New York City in the 70s and started a TV show called Looking East. It was the first TV series in America introducing Asia to Americans, which at that time had very little interest in Asia. In fact, Mike Wallace told me that it was a very bad idea because no one would watch me. I knew he was wrong. In those days, before CNN or other national TV networks, I syndicated my show on my own, bicycling tapes to 12 stations across the country each week for a national coverage. Obviously, people watched it, including Joan Connor, head of PBS New York. It was she who called me on September 28, 1984, offering me to host a historical event. He wanted me to host their live broadcast of the parade held on Tiananmen Square, making the 35th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. It was the first joint venture between China and PBS, and I was tasked with explaining an up-to-then completely shrouded country to American audiences through live stream. Guess how many days I had to prepare? 2. That was when they suddenly realized that the feed from China would have no narration except for a speech in Chinese by Deng Xiaoping. Without an English narration, no PBS station across the country would pick up the broadcast, rendering the joint venture a big failure. Obviously, that was not what PBS wanted. When Joan first approached me, she asked me to do an off-camera narration. I instinctively felt that was unacceptable. Would you ask Walter Cronkite to be off camera? I asked. I'm just as much of an expert on China as he is on his area. I had to admit I was really bold to make such an overstatement. Despite my Chinese face, my knowledge of China was very, very limited. I didn't even speak Mandarin at that time. The moment PBS agreed to put me on camera, I started doing research. I worked non-stop with no sleep for those 2 days. There was no internet and so little material on China back then. From CCTV, we only got a list of things coming through the live feed, no other details. There was a military parade, followed by a group of civilian floats. We concentrated on finding materials about the military and tried really hard to learn the culture in 48 hours. Oh, just a few hours before the broadcast, we were given the Chinese text of the speech to be given by Deng Xiaoping, so we had to scramble to translate that too. On the day of the live broadcast, just imagine this, clutching a group of cards with notes. I am at the PBS studio. I am watching the footage coming through while I'm on camera too. And I have to explain what this whole thing is about. Deng Xiaoping shows up. When his car passes Tiananmen Gate in the center of the city, he suddenly proclaims, 同志们,你们好, comrades, how are you? I remember the students screaming in reply suddenly to 小平你好, which means, Deng Xiaoping, how are you? It was just an amazing 2-hour historical broadcast. Reactions to the broadcast in the US was overwhelming. PBS got mixed reviews. Some praised it, and some said that PBS should never have given China a chance to do propaganda. From the Chinese Americans, the reaction was unanimously positive. It was the first time many of them had seen the country of their birth, making it a very emotional moment for them. For me, although it was an almost impossible task, but I did it and felt lucky to have made history. Life is like that. One thing leads to another, and when we do something well, another door opens. I got an invitation from CCTV to visit China. On December 18, 1984, I flew alone from New York to Beijing. In thinking back, I'm amazed that I was brave enough to go alone. China at that time was very much like North Korea today, dark and dreary with many Russian-style buildings. I don't think I would go to North Korea by myself today, would you? I met with the leading officials of CCTV and Mr. Ai Zisang, Minister of Television, Radio, and Film. They could not have been nicer to me. Minister Ai thanked me for making the historic PBS broadcast such a success and put forward a proposition. They wanted to use TV more to educate the Chinese about the outside world. He said, how can we open China if we don't know anything about the outside world, or neither does the outside world know about us? I said I could produce that TV series better than anyone else in China because I'm American, educated in the West. I would have a much broader view of the world than their brainwashed colleagues. I couldn't believe it. They immediately agreed. Like a typical American, I asked for a contract. They told me to draft one that night. I put together a one-pager of 8 points, and they quickly signed and stamped. I was shocked by the speed. Recently, I asked the lady in charge of contract at CCTV the reason. She laughed and said, because we simply didn't know how to write a contract. In the early 80s, state-owned CCTV, the only TV station that served the entire country, has 6 hours of programming a day and only one channel. Programming was cheap and boring because there was no money, no advertising, due to no consumer spending. There was simply nothing to buy. I have been given a mandate to produce a series of TV shows to educate the Chinese public about the world. 104 episodes in English and in Mandarin, which I did not even speak. I was stunned that they would ask a foreigner to produce and host a series on their national network. Never happened before, and I knew it was going to be significant. But then came the hard question, Who would pay for it? CCTV admitted they could not because they had no money. So I came up with the idea that they would give me advertising time to pay for the production costs. Thus, my TV series One World Amongst Many Firsts was the first TV series on the history of modern Chinese TV that had advertising attached. It was completely funded with commercial time I personally sold to P&G, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Gillette, etc. Things have changed a lot these days. Today, CCTV has 50 channels and is accessible to more than 1 billion global viewers in 6 different languages. Because of its vast reach, CCTV's advertising rate has gone through the roof. The advertising rate for 5 seconds is about $17,000. That is immediately before and after the primetime news broadcast at 7 p.m. every night. The One World series lasted from 1987 to 89. Many asked if there was a lot of editorial control. Surprisingly, I was given almost 100% editorial control. There were only 2 instances I was asked to make some changes. One was on a beach in Denmark in the summer, where some women were topless. We were very careful only to film their backs, but it was still not good enough. We had to take those out. The second one was Mother Teresa. Since the Chinese government did not recognize the Roman Catholic Church, they did not think it was appropriate to put a nun in the show. I fought for it and put it in an episode on the Nobel Prize I shot in Sweden at the Karolinska Institute. I argued that the fact that she was a nun was not important, but the fact that she was a Nobel Peace Prize winner was. They let that pass. I have since done a lot of TV shows in China, but never have I experienced such freedom as this first series. Today, the censorship is even more stringent. One World covered 16 countries with info and images they had never seen before and made me very famous, an instantly recognizable face for more than 1 billion Chinese. It fed into the deep desire of the Chinese people to be part of the world. Reactions were all positive. They said, "You inject a breath of fresh air into our stale world." One World opened my eyes, completely changed my life, inspired me to hope and dream. I'm here in the United States because of you, or I learned to speak English because of you. It is a real privilege that I was able to influence a whole generation of people. Now let's talk about beauty. During the Mao era, from 1949, the use of cosmetics was limited to the people on stage. It was considered bourgeois, even a crime. The country was physically ugly, dull, and colorless. The word beauty was not part of the vocabulary. Everyone looked exactly the same. After the opening in 1979, people's imagination of beauty began to emerge. They dared to think about wearing clothes a little bit more colorful, but no one was leading the way until 1992, when I launched Yue-Sai Cosmetics in China. I wanted them to have a tool that could help them to look their individual best. Cosmetics could help to emancipate and to empower them if they choose to use it. I said to them, if you can change the way you look, you can be and do anything you wish. It was a novel idea, and it was the very spirit that I wanted to inject into the psyche of Chinese women. The fact that Yue-Sai Cosmetics became the #1 brand in China by 1996 showed me that the message was accepted. I invested a few million US injecting colors into a colorless country and, quote, changed the face of China, one lipstick at a time, as Forbes magazine says. I wanted the Chinese to have a brand which provides products that are so good and so appropriate for their unique skin and coloring, not just a copy of Western cosmetics. I changed the way cosmetic counters in department stores were set up. I was the first to place beauty consultants who were really well-trained, not just in the use of cosmetics, but manners and voice, traveling endlessly all over the country, given numerous TV interviews, writing articles and books, doing endless appearances for massive gatherings and packed crowds in department stores. I helped to popularize the use of cosmetics in China and open that category of business when there was almost none before. In the process, I also helped to start consumerism in China. Yue-Sai Cosmetics grew from 3 counters in Shanghai in 1992 to 800 all over China by the time I sold it to L'Oreal in 2004. I also sold them 3 factories and 24 branch companies. To show you how popular we were, once a man went to our Tianjin office with a big bag full of cash and refused to leave until he got some Yue-Sai products to take back home to sell. Over the years, with the rise of middle class, China has become the fastest growing market in beauty. It has prompted many US, European, Korean, and Japanese brands to enter the market. In fact, there are more foreign brands, some I never even heard of, selling in China than in the United States. With the rapid development of e-commerce, the consumption gap between the low-level cities and first and second-tier cities has been narrowed, and the market is mature. But the hottest topic re e-commerce is online celebrities who sell goods today on live streaming and short video platforms. In this process, online celebrities has opened a new era, changing the shopping habits of consumers, changing the traditional supply chain, changing the profit distribution, and a completely new service industry has been developed. The most famous e-commerce cosmetic sales celebrity is a male called Li Jiaqi. He used to work as a beauty consultant for L'Oreal, and he once sold 15,000 lipsticks in 5 minutes on live streaming. Isn't that amazing? Now, women entrepreneurs. When I registered Yue-Sai Cosmetics in China in 1990, and there were very few entrepreneurs, let alone women entrepreneurs, I was one of the first ones to do business on such a big national scale. I am absolutely sure that many would-be women entrepreneurs looking at my success would say to themselves, I'm inspired. If Yue-Sai can do it, so can I. Chinese women are brought up under the slogan of women holding up half of the sky. Different from a lot of other countries, they are never discriminated against when it comes to business. They are treated equally as their male counterparts. They can own a business, get a loan, buy real estate in their names, etc. Many people have questioned me if I had found it difficult to do business in China as a female. Actually, not at all. I have found that being female, famous, sometimes is an advantage. Today, according to the Hurun report, 61 of the world's top 100 self-made female billionaires are Chinese. They covered all industries, real estate, manufacturing, technology, you name it. They choose to start a business because they saw the opportunity to gain independence and achieve success. They have a vision, they're super hardworking, and they are not afraid to fail. However, I don't see that many Chinese women holding high political positions. Even if they do, their positions tend to be ceremonial or women-related. Here in the United States, we just elected our first female vice president. It is a big accomplishment. But in Europe, quite a number of countries have female heads of state. Even in Asia, look at Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Thailand, Nepal, Vietnam, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia. They all have had female heads of state or government already. So both China and the United States have a lot to catch up in this regard. Education. An international study comparing the status of teachers in 21 countries found that teachers in China have the highest level of public respect. There is even a Teachers' Day in China. This confirms a strong traditional emphasis on the importance of education. Today, mandatory 9-year free compulsory education effectively covers 85% of the population. I myself build libraries, schools, and support charities that send teachers to rural areas of China. Now I want to discuss an interesting kind of education unique to China, and that is the education of Western etiquette. Since I have traveled extensively in China and interacted with a great variety of people, I was made painfully aware how un-international the Chinese were. Most Westerners who visited China in the 80s and 90s often comment negatively on Chinese behavior in public. Being rude, loud, inconsiderate, and poor hygiene are some of the bad qualities cited. Some Chinese who needed to deal with Western counterparts were in a very difficult situation because they had no idea what was expected of them in terms of behavior. Some told me that they did not even know how to use forks and knives. They felt very insecure. So in the year 2000, with the encouragement of Minister of Culture Xuan Jiazheng, I gave the best gift I could give to the Chinese for the millennium by writing the first book about modern etiquette in China, Etiquette for the Modern Chinese. It covers all aspects of life, such as manners, appearance, posture, how to eat Western food, even down to invitation and thank you letter. I have never been able to find out how many copies were sold due to poor accounting of the publisher, but I'm sure it was millions because it was on the bestseller list from 2000 to 2004 and chosen by the Beijing government to be serialized on their newspapers. Shortly after that, some pirated versions of the book appeared on the market with different book titles using my name. I had to go to a press conference to clarify that they were not written by me. So far, I have published 9 books in China. The Chinese Gentleman and The Complete Chinese Woman were bought by many companies as teaching material for their staff. Etiquette for the Modern Chinese, I talked about, served as training manuals for volunteers at the 2008 Beijing Olympics and the 2010 Shanghai World Expo. Exquisite Spaces, a coffee table book featuring, for the first time, design philosophies and tips from 25 world-class designers and their works. It was significant because it was published at a time when interior design merely meant buying a TV and put 2 couches in front of it in new apartments. Life is a competition in 99 ways to live a charmed life provided young Chinese advice in career, relationship, and all-round development. And currently, I am working on my own memoir. Now let's talk about 慈善, philanthropy. This is something I have learned in the United States. You know, Americans are the most generous people in the world. We gave away $450 billion in 2019. In China, however, it was a new word until recently. The communistic system was supposed to take care of its citizens from cradle to grave. Early on, when outside people suggested charitable donations to China, the government was really embarrassed by it. Even by the 80s, people thought charity was 搞笑, a joke. But this perception changed with the encouragement of the government when they discovered that citizens can do a lot to help elevate the society. Reform and opening up made China rich. Today, a lot of rich Chinese donate to charities, both in China and overseas, sometimes to the tune of billions. This is a good trend, and I am happy to see it. I have been involved in charity work since I was young. At Brigham Young, Hawaii, the Mormon Church requires us to give 10% of our income to the church. I have done that throughout my entire life. Owning a successful business in China gave me the opportunity to introduce the concept of charity to the country. One day in 1995, my neighbor, the wife of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mrs. Boutros-Ghali, told me, I am going to Beijing for the first UN Global Women's Conference. This is going to be a big deal, and I think you should really get involved, she said. It will forward women's agenda in the world unprecedentedly. I immediately checked with my staff and learned that our profit of the year was roughly $1.5 million. I decided to donate it all to the UN Women's Conference. The argument I used to convince my staff was, What is the purpose of doing women business in China if we are not to support the issues of women? Over the years, I was involved in many different causes and charitable organizations in China, such as the Song Qingling Foundation, the Zheng Ai Foundation. I built schools, give scholarships, raise money to purchase medical supplies for maternal care, and host many charitable events to raise millions for Smile Train and Operation Smile. Now my focus has shifted to the environment. Later this year, I will be staging a big Save the Ocean project in China, hopefully in 6 cities. If you want to, I can tell you more later. Everything I did in China, I first learned in America. I learned marketing, I embraced entrepreneurship, I believe in the American dream, I believe in helping others and doing good. While I'm a big fan of what China has accomplished in the last 40 years, there are so many things I can criticize China about. The press, for example, is never free. There is definitely corruption, copyright infringement, and the law is still rather opaque, etc., etc. One more thing I want to say though. For a long time, the Chinese believed that the West was great in everything. This rosy perception, I'm afraid, is no longer true, especially in the last 4 years. They still want modernization, yes, not necessarily Westernization, but their interest in knowing and learning never changed. As summary, I want to quickly update you with some other meaningful facts at random. In the last 40 years, the Chinese have built amazing infrastructures covering the entire country with roads, tunnels, bridges, and airports. More than anything else, this has helped to propel China's growth. Today, they're expanding their infrastructure building capacities to all over the world. China also is the biggest trading partner with most countries in the world, and it is the most important market for many companies in the world. No one can ignore the China market with its massive population that grows more affluent every day. Oh, Forbes just reported in March 2020 there are 614 billionaires, not millionaires, from the United States and 456 from Greater China. Zhong Shan, chairman of Chinese bottled water Nanfu Spring, just became the 6th richest person on the planet, richer than Warren Buffett. What a difference from just 36 years ago when I started working in China, when an average Chinese made only about $60 a year. And freedom to travel. Almost no one traveled out of China in 1978. But in 2019, 170 million Chinese travel freely out of China, changing completely the global tourism industry in every way. And by the way, they also return freely back to China. Technology is a big game changer in the Chinese society. As if overnight, China has evolved into a no cash, no credit card society. Today, their smartphones can do everything, including monitoring health. Wait until 5G comes into full force. Chinese lives will be changed even faster and will be even more significant on the world stage. Today, English is mandatory in the curriculum starting from grade 1 in China. It is estimated that up to 350 million Chinese learn to read and speak some English. In 1979, the first Chinese came to the United States to study. Today, there are almost 400,000 enrolled in U.S. schools. They will also be the catalyst to further modernize China going into the future. I would argue that the Chinese know more about America than the other way around, with China being the fastest growing economy, which will impact every part of our lives. Maybe it's high time that we get to know China better. No matter what we do, China will continue to rise. This relationship is important, and we must resolve misunderstandings and find common ground so we can prosper together. It has been my lifelong mission to use media, culture, and art to advance this relationship, and I hope you will join me. Thank you.
Yue-Sai Kan, what a brilliant talk. I feel that we've traveled the world with you, and I look forward to more. Let me introduce the panelists who will join Rose Chen and myself. Alex Nergis is the director and CEO of the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. During his long and successful tenure at the VMFA, the museum has hosted 4 major exhibitions in partnership with leading cultural institutions in China, including in 2017-18 Terracotta Army, Legacy of the First Emperor of China, and in 2014-15 Forbidden City, Imperial Treasures from the Palace Museum. Welcome, Alex. We're also joined by Dr. Betty Neal Crutcher, who is a renowned mentor who consults and leads workshops for organizations and institutions in cross-cultural mentoring, as well as a long-term university presidential spouse with the expertise in diplomacy such a role requires. Dr. Crutcher also serves on the Board of Trustees of the Virginia Museum of Fine Art. So the panelists will ask questions in turn, and I will take the prerogative of the chair by asking the first one. You and I spoke earlier, Yue-Sai, about Alexis de Tocqueville and people who are pioneers in explaining one culture to another. What do you hope is your most substantial legacy as you seek to promote greater understanding between the United States and China?
That's a very sad question, because the last few years, this relationship has deteriorated so much. It's as if overnight, everything that Rose has done, everything I have done has been eradicated. And it was sad because of basically both sides, not just one side. But I have to say that there is a lot of distrust now between the two countries. I'm very concerned. I'm hoping that we will have a renewed rebuilding of the trust between us. Because if this doesn't happen, it would be really for me, it would be a disaster. First of all, for me, it's a real disaster, right? And I must say that, because you talk about Tocqueville, but Tocqueville is a must-study book for the comrade schools in China. And therefore, that means it's not like they don't know anything about democracy in China. It is extremely interesting to note that they do know. As a matter of fact, you know that I just found out that when I read that Chairman Mao was actually interested in meeting the American president. And of course, that was denied and never happened. And as a matter of fact, Chairman Mao was a big supporter of democracy. In fact, if you Google, you will find a poem that he wrote on the day of July 4th. I don't remember exactly which year now, that was really praising democracy. Is that amazing to you? But I think also that the Chinese are very interested in having their own form of government, not just the American form of government. And when Chairman Deng Xiaoping gave a speech 4 days, he even announced the opening of China. His speech at the United Nations said very clearly that he wished that every country will be allowed to have its own form of government according to their needs. So if you say what I hope, you ask me what I hope it will happen, I hope that we will have a lot of respect for each other, and that we will also try to know each other better. There is no reason why we don't, because I remember there's a quote, and let me quote you because I wrote it down here. Xi Jinping met Trump in 2017. He said, "We have 1,000 reasons to get the Chinese-US relations right, and not one reason to spoil it." And he's absolutely right. So if this is the mandate, then there is very much for us to do. We have a lot to do, both really on both sides. And I really hope that this is going to happen.
Thank you for your work on building bridges. So Alex, a question for our speaker.
Well, I should defer to Betty, ladies first.
Well, I feel joyful at your doing that. Thank you very much. First of all, I just want to welcome you, Ms. Khan, into our lives. And I look forward to meeting you after the pandemic and to asking you more questions. But I'll start with this one. You said early in your speech, you called it fate. And I would call it courage. And I ask you now, what gave you the courage at a young age to do what you did in so many ways to affect the change that you've affected in so many lives?
Wonderful question, because I have to credit it back to my parents. My parents were always very instrumental in encouraging me to do things. If I said I wanted to learn the piano, they would try to find the best piano teacher for me. If I say I want to learn to dance the ballet, they would find the best ballet school for me. So anything I wanted to do, they were always encouraging. Like, for example, we were so poor, I could not possibly have gone to school in America if I hadn't gotten a scholarship. So I went to NYU. I'm in Hawaii right now. And I attended school in Brigham Young for 4 years when I was a child. I was 16 years old. They were very astonished when I asked to go to America, because in those days, going to America for school was a huge deal. And it was a very expensive proposition. But my parents somehow managed to do that for us. In fact, they did it for all four daughters of theirs. So I'm very fortunate. I think my courage, if you say, Dr. Crutcher, that how do I get the courage? It's because my mom and dad encouraged us and always gave us the idea, what is valuable, what is important in life. So I think that education, I'm sure you agree, that it has to be part of our mission going forward, trying to promote the correct perception, correct ideas.
It's a great question, Betty. I'm glad you went first. Puts more pressure on me, but you touched on probably the most sensitive part of what really underlies the subject of relationship between China and the United States. And I can tell you, I applaud everything you've been doing, and of course, Rose and the University of Richmond. We've long been, and I've been for more than almost going on 30 years, on the same path to try to eliminate the ignorance. And you are absolutely right. The Chinese people, to a person, are much more knowledgeable about America, current politics, everything, sports. They don't miss a beat. Americans are beyond ignorant about China. In fact, it's appalling. But underlying it, quite frankly, is racism. It is that people with so-called yellow skin are inferior to the Americans who are white.
We're yellow peril.
Oh my God! And you know, you touched on something. I won't get into politics, but you know, the Chinese leaders have said constantly, "Let us have our political system. We respect yours. Please respect ours." My question to you is, given the well of animosity and racism against Chinese people, and quite frankly, Chinese American, and unfortunately, since the ignorance runs so deep, you know, anybody who looks Asian, and that includes people from Japan and Korea and from the Philippines and Vietnam and everywhere else. What can all of our viewers and what can all of our friends do to help bridge that gap? Because it is about eliminating ignorance. And, you know, we try to do that all the time to display the 5,000, 6,000 years of unbroken artistic heritage that China has, that quite frankly no other country in the world can say. But how do we break down that barrier of racism?
I'm involved with China Institute, as Rose said to you. And China Institute is one of those examples that are really doing great things. We have hundreds of programs a year. I think that people do want peace, don't they? I mean, deep down in our own hearts, we want peace. If you look at China for sure loves peace. You remember in Tiananmen Square, there's a picture of Chairman Mao, yeah, right there. And after, they're saying, there's a line saying, they are looking for the peace around the world. That's what they really wanted. The most important street in China is Chang'an-jie. Chang'an-jie, you know what Chang'an-jie means? Chang'an-jie means the street of eternal peace, not just peace, eternal peace. That's really a very deep psychological need of the Chinese that really want peace. They've had so many ups and downs. You know, we're Americans, we don't really have that many. So peace is really what I think that everybody wants. And I'm just hoping that we will be very careful about protecting peace for each other.
Eternal peace. You are ambitious. So
yes.
I'll ask Rose to submit the final question as a panelist, and I'm asking the audience members to please submit your questions through the Q&A function. We already have a few questions coming in. So Rose.
Yue-Sai, do you think cultural differences play a role in the misunderstanding between US and China? If so, could you give us some example? From my own experience, very quickly, dragon. The Western dragon is evil, fire breathing. But the Chinese dragon, because the Chinese are agrarian society, bring water. So it's always up in the sky with cloud. And the emperor is the descendant of dragon. So the two dragons is very different. This is, one of the example I can offer you.
Obviously, there are lots of differences. You know, a lot of misunderstanding or a lot of misconception is really due to a lack of understanding, right? For example, in language, you know, a lot of Americans, and we believe in multi-systems, right? I mean, we have Republicans, we have independent, we have all these. And you will ask, how do the Chinese get to be so easily adapting to the one-party system? But that's just very cultural. If you think about it, you know, how cultural is that? The Chinese, the moment you are born a Chinese, you already have a very clear idea what you are. You are a daughter, and you know exactly where your parents are, and your parents know exactly where they are related to the leaders. Confucianism has created a society that is very clear in the way of the positioning of each person and our duties, etc. The hierarchy of the Chinese society is so clear that it's difficult for American to really understand that. It's so clear that, for example, in the Chinese language, there's no such a word as brother or sister. There is a word called older brother or younger brother, older sister or younger sister. You know, so me being the oldest, none of my three younger sisters will ever call me Yue-Sai. It is impolite. They will all call me in Cantonese. Cantonese is Daigaji. So they will never dare call me Yue-Sai, never. So even in this little example, you know that the emperor in the old days, was up there. There's no question about that. So it is really easier for the Chinese to accept a one-party system. So it is something that we have to understand it. The Chinese and the Chinese background is so different. You know, 80% of China was farmers, remember? And I mean, of course, it's changing dramatically in the last 40 years. But 80% of farmers, you know what it's like in a Chinese farm? The Chinese farm they live in a village. There is no public and no private space. Everything is public space, everything. And that's the reason why they're criticized for having very lousy manners. They're screaming, they're loud, and they're using the floor as toilets for children. Why wouldn't they? They're in the farms, you need to go to pee, you just go outside and pee, right? So a lot of people don't quite, really it's difficult to understand it. And how can you, because you didn't grow up in this kind of environment, am I not right? So of course, there's a lot of misconception the Chinese have of the United States too, right? The Chinese would say, oh, Americans are too free. What? They may be too free, but we have wonderful check and balance system. A president can be so bombastic and say the most horrendous things, and the judges will come down and say, stop it, you're not right. Peace was restored. So I'm very impressed with that. I am so hopeful, and I'm so optimistic about that. Watching the Chinese watching America with all those things, the attack on the Capitol or all that, and then the way we have been dealing with pandemics, and a lot of Chinese friends say to me, oh, America is going to fall apart. Oh, no, I don't think so. I don't think America is easily going to fall apart. You just take one element that I can think of. Okay, let's just talk about soft power. Okay, in China, we eat McDonald's, we drink Coca-Cola, we watch Tom Cruise, we sing Celine Dion. I mean, the soft power is so major. Let me ask you a question. Do you know one great Chinese actress? Do you sing a great Chinese song? I know maybe Mr. Alex knows a great Chinese painter, but most people don't know. Misconception is like my grandfather, went to San Francisco, and he was only 16 years old. In those days, everybody thought that every American is rich. That perception somehow, has been very pervasive, and that is not exactly true anymore, is it? With all the homelessness that we've got in America and a lot of people out of jobs, it's going to be a very difficult, a very different kind of perception that they're going to have about America going forward.
So we are getting questions from the audience. Let me try submitting one of these. So you mentioned in your remarks that there was criticism when the footage from China was shown on that early television program for which you had exactly 2 days to prepare your text. What is your perspective about US media's attitude and portrayal of China in recent times?
Crazy. If I have one real criticism about America today, it really has to be with this media. When we were doing a lot of television shows, we were trying to find the truth, right? If you're talking to people like the Walter Cronkites and the people like the Mike Wallaces, they don't really impart opinions. Today, media, like TV personalities, they no longer do the news. They tell you what they think. That is really dangerous because opinions are irresponsible. I mean, seriously, I have a real problem with looking at today's journalists. I have a real problem looking at social media because I do think that there's a lot of fake stuff going on, and I'm if you ask me what I'm worried about, that's one thing I'm really worried about.
I think you have a lot of company on that. I'm a Russianist, and a lot of the disinformation we're experiencing is classic what happens in that country.
Yes.
Another question, because you addressed 5 different areas, we're going to have to jump around, Yue-Sai. Could you tell us more about the environmental project you're working on installing later this year?
Yeah. there is an artist in New York with a Chinese wife. They collected 5 tons of garbage, right out in the big island of Hawaii. And these are, they chose the big pieces, and chose the color, blue and white. And they created a 4.5-story high whale. And if you think about this, plastic is the disaster for the environment. Plastic will never disintegrate, no matter what you do to it. So the ocean is dying. The ocean is dying. So I wanted to bring this ocean, this symbol of the dying ocean. I wanted to bring this huge, gigantic thing to China, to 6 cities, and with this whale, I wanted to bring all the students in a city to see it. I want them to see a video how plastic is so dangerous to our lives. I want them to also understand what they can do to the environment themselves. And the third thing I want them to do is to pledge. And with that, we are going to have lectures, we are going to have fashion shows, we are going to have cleaning the ocean kind of activities for the kids. We are going to have art competitions, and we're going to paint one of the subways in Shanghai into an ocean. And it's going to be a huge event.
Sounds very graphic and very high impact. So
very
fantastic.
Very.
Here's a question. Do you think Chinese students will continue to study and work in the United States? What other countries are becoming important destinations for Chinese students and young professionals? And maybe there I have some answers, but I'd like to hear you say, do you think Chinese students will continue to study and work in the United States?
I think they will, for as long as they're allowed to.
Right.
I think that, as I said, the idea of democracy is really still a very attractive to most of the friends I know. So it's not like they definitely, must stay in America anymore. There are lots of opportunities in China as well today.
Mm-hmm. So from my perspective, I can simply add that the United States remains the country of choice. We're still the best known for our higher ed. Chinese students are choosing Canada, Britain, and Australia. The numbers rose sharply in the early Trump administration, but now they're stabilizing. So we'll see. And you're right. Most Chinese students who choose to work in the United States after they receive their degree take advantage of the work program, and they stay for maybe a year, 1 to 3 years, and then they go to China. Given your entrepreneurship and focus in your business career on beauty, it's not surprising we have a number of questions asking about wellness and the remarkable fact of your own incredible skin and appearance. That's what people are mentioning. So I have to add my own 2 cents, which is that seeing you in the footage at age 25, 39, and today, it's really hard to tell any difference. So what are your secrets to well-being based on your long career?
Don't I love you, Dr. Merritt? No. I'm very spoiled because I have now been able to stay in Hawaii for a whole year. Every year I stay only 2 months in Hawaii because of the cold winter in New York. New York really is. But however, this year I have been able to stay here, and it's because of that I swim in the ocean. I learned to swim. I learned to hula. I learned to. Hey, I love it. I love it. I have been very active actually. I do yoga. So I think that the fact that I am very happy, the fact that I think I'm doing something. I'm writing my book. I mean, even though it's very stressful, but it's very meaningful to me because I wanted to share some of my experiences with people who might be interested in reading my book. Writing the book is extremely freeing for me.
It has been a fascinating evening. I want to really thank you, Yue-Kan, for your enlightening presentation and very thoughtful words, and also call us to act, call us to do something. I hope this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship between us and also with you and with China Institute. And to our panelists, Betty and Alex, your remarks have added so much to the discussion. And Martha and your team at the University of Richmond, top notch. Yeah, I can't thank you enough for making this possible. And last but not least, our audiences. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we look forward to having you explore the other parts of our programs we offer. And stay safe, stay strong until we meet in person soon. Thank you. Thank you.